Happy Friday. Today is June 5th, and it's 68 days until I get to see my kiddos again. And the happy thing about today is my son graduated from 8th grade today, so he is going on to high school in the fall. So I'm excited about that too. All right, starting a whole new book. Now you're going to have to trust me that this is a really good author and it's a really good book. You're going to love it. Every year, every time I get to read it anyway, the kids are all, oh, but it's not written by Beverly Cleary. I know, and I love her, and you know I do. But this is also a really good book, and you are going to you're just going to love it. That's what I'm going to say about that. So it's called The Enormous Egg, and it's written by Oliver Butterworth. What a fun name, right? And I love this picture of the town. So would that be the country or the city? Yep, you're right. And there's no table of contents, but there are chapters, and they're not titled anything. It just says chapter 1. So chapter 1. And this book is written as if the boy is telling the story. So my name is Nate Twitchell, but I can't help that. It's a kind of a funny name, but I've had it for 12 years. So he's 12 years old. And I'm pretty much used to it by now. And I guess a lot of other folks have got used to it too after the thing that happened up here in Freedom last summer. That's the name of the town I live in, Freedom, New Hampshire. It's just a little town with a few houses all along one street and a store and a church and not much else. Oh yeah, and a school. I almost forgot that. We're only about 3 miles from the Maine state line. But Pop says Freedom's just as much a part of our state as Concord is, and somebody has to live near the state of Maine. My pop, that's what people call their dads, runs a newspaper here in town. It's called the Freedom Sentinel, and it comes out once a week. We mail out a lot of copies to people in Effingham and Center Ossipee and places like that. I guess the paper doesn't make much money. But we have some chickens and a goat and a vegetable garden, and that helps out. But I want to tell you about this thing that happened to us. I don't know just where to begin. I guess I better go back to last spring when Mrs. Parsons began leaving her window open. You see, she sleeps with her bedroom window shut all winter, but when it warms up again in May, she begins leaving her window open at night. Pop always waits for Mrs. Parsons to open that window before he plants his beans. He says it's more dependable than the almanac. Anyway, her house is next to ours, and her window looks out on our backyard, where the chicken coop is. And last spring, she began to complain to Mom that the rooster was waking her up with his crowing. She said we ought to get rid of him. We had a family conference the next morning at breakfast. Mom said we didn't have any right to disturb the neighbors just because we wanted to keep an old rooster. Pop said he thought we might have the right to disturb the neighbors, but we had better not disturb Mrs. Parsons because she lets us keep our goat in her back lot. Cynthia, she's my sister, said she didn't care what happened to that nasty old bird. That made me kind of mad because we've had that old rooster for 6 years now and I like him. My Uncle Julius brought him over to us from his farm in Potter Place. He's a New Hampshire red, the rooster I mean, and he's got a wild look in his eye and he always runs at my sister with his wings flapping whenever he gets a chance. She hates him. There's his sister Cynthia being chased. Anyway, I said we ought to try some way of keeping the rooster quiet in the early morning, and if it worked, then we could keep him. And Mrs. Parsons could get her sleep and everything would be all right. And how do you propose to keep a rooster quiet? Pop wanted to know. Crowing at daybreak is a pretty strong habit with roosters. Well, couldn't we just shut him somewhere at night? I said we could, put him down in the cellar and it would be dark and he wouldn't know when it was time to crow. Mom never really enjoys having any of the livestock in the house, and she did not take to the idea, even when I promised to clean out his box every morning. But Pop said, why don't we try it for a while and see how it works? After all, he said, we don't want to sentence him without a trial. If we did that sort of thing up here in freedom, it would be a bad example to the rest of the country. In the end, Mom agreed to give it a try, and I was going to have the job of taking Ezekiel down the cellar every night and letting him out in the morning. We called the rooster Ezekiel after a great uncle of mine. Pop says it's really important to keep a name like that in the family. Well, for about a month, I went on carrying Ezekiel down into the cellar every night and carrying him out again in the morning. He didn't like it a bit, and he used to put up an awful fuss in the evening when I tried to catch him. When I picked him off the roost, he would squawk and beat his wings in my face, and feathers and dust would blow all over, and the hens would get all roused up and everything. I got kind of tired doing it every day, and sometimes I wondered if it was worthwhile doing all that just for a rooster. But you know how it is when you start doing something that's your own idea. You can't just back down and let people say, "Told you so." So I kept at it, and there got to be a lot of feathers scattered around the cellar. Sometimes about 3 o'clock in the morning, you could hear old Ezekiel whooping it up down there, but it was pretty muffled, and the rest of the family didn't say anything about it. It was just about the middle of June when this peculiar thing happened. For about a week, I had noticed that one of the hens was looking pretty weird. She had swelled out quite a bit and was lopsided. And her feathers stuck out all over, the way a hen gets when she's too worried to smooth herself down. Pop thought she was just broody and wanted to set, and he told me to keep shooing her off the nest, but I had an idea it was something more than that. She got so big she could hardly waddle, and I didn't have the heart to push her off the nest once she climbed up on it. So all that week, she just sat there getting more and more bulgy. And that's kind of like me right now during this whole quarantine thing. And looking more and more surprised at herself. Then one morning when I carried Ezekiel out to the chicken yard, I looked in the hen house to see how this hen was getting along, and oh my goodness, there was the biggest egg I'd ever seen. It was so big, it took up just about the whole nest. And there was the hen teetering on the edge of the box with her head tilted to one side, looking at that egg as if she couldn't figure out what it was. I touched it, and it had kind of a leathery shell, more like a turtle egg. And it was sort of longish shape and as big as a mushmelon, or maybe even bigger. So he's talking maybe about like this big egg. I ran back to the house and I yelled out that our hen had just laid the biggest egg in the world and hurry up and look at it before it explodes or something. We all tore out of the hen house, out to the hen house, and I was afraid the egg would be gone, but there it was. And the hen was sitting on top of it doing her very best to cover it. She looked really puzzled and as if this wasn't quite what she had expected, but she was going to make the best of it anyway, and I really admired her for that. I admired her. Pop thought it was some kind of a trick at first, and he looked at me out of the corner of his eye like, right. But when he lifted the hen off the egg and looked it over very carefully, they all agreed it was a real egg, but a weird one. Pop scratched his head and he looked at the chicken and then at the egg. And then back at the chicken again. Doesn't seem possible, he said. The egg's almost as big as she is. How could she do it? What will we do with it? My sister asked. We could all have it for breakfast, Pop suggested. How many minutes would you boil an egg that size? We will not have it for any breakfast, Mom said. I will not have that thing in my kitchen. It looks like a snake's egg to me. Some snake, Pop said. But I asked why not keep it and let the hen sit on it until it hatched, and then we could see what would come out of it. Nothing good, I'm certain of that, Mom said. It would probably be something horrible, but just remember, if it's a crocodile or a dragon or something like that, I won't have it in my house for 1 minute. And there they are all checking it out. And you can see how big the egg is compared to the hen. And I'll get closer for that. Oh my goodness, look at that. Quite large. Very well, Mrs. Twitchell, Pop said, winking at me. We'll promise not to bring any dragons into the house. He lifted the hen back on top of the enormous egg, and she slipped around and fluttered her wings, trying to get her balance up there. We all went back to the house for breakfast. Pop said that egg would give him something besides local gossip to put in the newspaper for a change. Cynthia wasn't as excited about the big egg as I was, but she would have been if she had known what was going to hatch out of it. Little cliffhanger there, right? Chapter 2 next time. All right, have a great weekend, and I hope that this has piqued your interest enough to get you to want to watch some more. But it's a really great book. You have to trust me on that. All right, have a great weekend. Love you guys. Bye.